another one. Sorry, I know that we have some technical issues all over the pavilion, so this is not an exception. But this is the first event that the Hub is organizing in COP30. We have many events coming on the coming days in different pavilions with different partners. And the main idea is to share with you and with key partners the outcome of the Food System Summit that took place just a few months ago in Addis Ababa. As you know, the Food System Summit came with a call to action from the Secretary General focusing on 6 intervention areas, interventions in conflict areas, dialogues, harnessing science, increasing financing, and also engaging with youth. So today, we would like to build on the result of the Food System Summit. We have a very interesting panel. We are lucky to have also a representative of the Brazilian presidency who will give us some insights. But we also have 3 speakers who represent maybe the global perspective, the regional perspective from the Caribbean, and also national perspective from Denmark. So I would like to start by inviting Mr. Saulo Colin, who's representing the Brazilian presidency, to give us his insights also on the recent declaration against hunger and how Brazil would like to take this forward and put food systems as central area in COP30. Over.
Should I go here? Right. Well, thank you. First of all, apologies for the unhealthy temperature in these rooms. I think that the presidency is trying to tell you that climate change is really a reality and that we're there already. So I'm sorry that I'm not wearing my jacket, but I still kept the tie, at least. But thank you for the Hub for organizing this, and thank you to the Nordic Council and the organizers. It's a pleasure to be here with you, representing Brazil, the host country, but also representing our national convener for the UN Food Systems Summit. We know very much that hunger affects over 773 million people, and that the climate impacts are already with us, and that despite ongoing efforts, the climate impacts are a harsh reality, especially for the most vulnerable. And it's thinking of those people that Brazil has proposed and launched last Friday, the Belém Declaration on Hunger, Poverty, and Human-Centered Climate Action. It was adopted at the COP30 Leaders Summit, and we started with 44 countries and the European Union endorsing the declaration. And we have reached today, just on the previous event where I was, the Netherlands has also come up endorsing the declaration, so we have already come up to 50 countries. The declaration underscores the synergies between climate, food security, and poverty eradication. And it aligns itself with some of the previous work that has been done in this area, particularly the Emirates Declaration on Sustainable Agriculture and the Baku Guiding Principles. And it also recognizes the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty, which Brazil has helped to launch last year as part of our G20 presidency, as a support mechanism, an action-oriented mechanism to allow countries to implement action in these areas. The declaration, we humbly think that it really brings a paradigm shift in climate action. It really puts the focus on humans, on human-centered, equity-driven, and the generation of decent jobs, social protection, sustainable livelihoods for those on the front lines of climate change, which are family farmers, smallholders, traditional communities, and forest peoples. We invite all countries present to endorse the declaration if you haven't done so already. You know that Brazil is already advancing domestically on this issue. We have a number of action that we have been implementing. We have just launching a new landmark on food systems and action which has been done interministerially. It was really a work of many months to get all our government agencies together to think about this such an important issue as food systems and climate. And we also thank the work of the hub, which has supported this on this. Brazil was one of the very first countries to work with the hub on what we call the Convergence initiative. Last October, we held in Brasilia a first seminar to start the discussion of this attempt to bring about the convergence of food systems and the climate action. We have a, so I think aside from this landmark framework that we have just released domestically, we are also going to work with the hub in the next semester with an action for the Amazon region. We are going to invite diplomats and government officers involved in food systems to learn more about food systems. It will be a training session of a few months with the support of our diplomatic academy and the support of the hub as well. We're looking forward to it. I could also mention as part of what Brazil has been doing on this area to value biodiversity. I think it's important to mention the dietary guidelines for the Brazilian population, which is a reference document. I don't know if you've heard of this, but all the public policies in Brazil related to food security, they use the dietary guidelines. So for example, our national school feeding program, it has to use the national guidelines. And the guidelines, they bring about things such as the value of biodiversity, the value of the diversity in diets. They have to be, the national school feeding program, it has to be regionalized. So sometimes even in the same state in Brazil, sometimes you have different diets from people that live in the coast, people that live in the forest region, people that live in the semi-arid region. And before, just a few decades before, what used to happen is that they would buy just canned soup or biscuits or sugary juice, and that would be distributed everywhere in the Amazon and like to regions where the children would not eat these things. And after the dietary guidelines, now it's a law actually. We have to respect it, and all the municipalities have to buy from local farmers. We have just passed, before it was 30% had to come from family farming, and we just passed a law that now it's 45% of the money spent on the school feeding program has to be used from family farmers' production. This is a goal that has already been reached by most municipalities. Some are still working on it. Of course, some don't have the production sufficient to reach this 45% level, but most are there already. And the goal is to go even higher than this. We also have something that I would like to highlight here, because it has to do with the Belém Declaration, which is the National Productive Forest Program. It is led by our Minister of Agrarian Development, and for me, I think it's a very good example also of how we can put together all these elements of climate change, of biodiversity, of healthy diets. The program helps to transform degraded land into reforested productive areas. It promotes income generation and food production. So we regrow the forest while at the same time helping the populations that live in the forest to produce healthy, sustainable food. So this is just a few examples. I could go on and on, but I realize this is a very short event. Just stop here. I would just like to finalize by saying that Brazil really saw this as an opportunity to bring these agendas together, to put food systems at the center of the agenda, to put the fight against hunger and poverty at the center of the climate agenda. And I'm happy to say that I think we're achieving this a little bit. This is maybe a first step, but at least I think we are managing to give a whole more attention to these issues and bringing the whole international community together with us to discuss all these issues. And I hope that this is something that will continue in the next COPs and the international debate. So thank you very much again, and have a good event.
Thank you so much, Saulo, and really very good intervention. intervention, and thanks again to Brazil for putting food systems at the center of discussion. I think the Belém Declaration is an important milestone. I also appreciate what you mentioned about the linkage with the Emirates Declaration. The work that you are doing with the hub is very important. Brazil, as you said, was one of the first countries to implement the Food Systems Climate Action Convergence Initiative, and now we are working together to move this initiative to be implemented at the regional level in Amazonia and other countries, making sure that countries can benefit from this policy coherence between food system and the climate. So thank you so much for this. Now it's my pleasure to invite our panelists for today. Let me start by Dr. Marcela Quintero, who is Associate Director General for Research Strategy and Innovation at the Alliance of Diversity International. Please. Also, Mr. Simon Spring, the highest ranking official is the RC in the Eastern Caribbean. Please, you can join. And lastly, Ms. Lisa Wolpem, who is the CEO of Food Nation Denmark. So let me start with you, Dr. Marcela. You are representing, okay, let me see first if this works. From a global research perspective, what are the key ways that climate change and biodiversity loss are shaping food system and nutrition outcome today? And how are you going to implement or support the implementation of the call to action in the Food System Summit last July? Over to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for all of you that are brave enough to be here with this heat. I think we are all feeling what the crops are feeling with the increase in 2 degrees. And this is to start my answer. I mean, we know from the scientific perspective that we are projecting a loss of almost 20% in the production of staple crops like maize, sorghum, and other cereals. So this is already something that is highly likely to happen. And at the same time, we are also making the things worse in the sense that we are relying in very few crops in our diets. So only 9 crops make 70% of the food production in the world. It means that all those thousands of crops that are edible plants that can also be more resilient, that are adapted to different local conditions, are currently not used. And this is also reflected in what we eat. So right now, our diets has lost the diversity, so we don't have also capacity to respond to different shocks that are posed by climate change. So with this, I want to bring the example that you just mentioned of Brazil, because we also are very proud of having contributed to that. And is that here in Brazil, with different universities and different partners, we support the analysis of nutritional data for 21 native species to show the nutritional value of those native species that can be the safety net to cope with the climate change in the different areas in Brazil. So we found crops with higher nutritional components like fiber, calcium, vitamin C. And then together with Brazil and also the willingness of Brazil, this has been translated in a policy where now the recognition of native species as a key for food security and resilience is integrated now in national policies. And in practice, going back to your question on how we can move from the scientific facts to the action, we are also happy to say that all this knowledge and all this coordination with policymakers is translated in a campaign in schools, meals programs in the country, to educate through school gardens on the value of incorporating native species, not only in the agricultural systems for the resilience of the systems themselves, but also in the plates of the kids. So this is, I just wanted to build, because you just mentioned this, but also we are very proud of showing how policy, when you bring NGOs, when you bring policies, when you bring universities and the scientists, you can translate this into concrete action. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much. And I think it is very important what you clarified about the linkage between science and policy implementation. Sometimes this happens automatically, sometimes it does not happen. We have barriers. So this gives me an opportunity to go to our second speaker, who is the RC in the Eastern Caribbean, Mr. Simon Springer, who recently actually is working very closely with the hub on developing system busways in 7 or 8 countries at one stage. So this is a very important step. You might want to tell us more about this. Over to you.
Thank you very much, and thanks everyone for joining us today, and also a thank you to the Food Systems Hub, who's really been doing a fantastic job in coordinating much of this work across the world. Across the CARICOM countries, I'm sitting in Barbados covering the Organization of Eastern European States, but we're working across all of the CARICOM countries. And in CARICOM, the annual food security import bill is approximately $6 billion a year, with most countries in the region, apart from Belize and Guyana, importing, are net importers, with at least 7 of those countries importing at least 80% of their food. And in the Eastern Caribbean, that actually creeps up even higher. So in Antigua, as an example, 92% of the food is imported. And you can imagine the effects that has both on the economy, but also on the agricultural systems. So in response to this dependency across CARICOM, CARICOM launched an initiative called 25 by 25, which was essentially trying to reduce food imports by 25% by this year. It certainly hasn't reached that yet, but the goal and the ambition is still there. And part of this was through regional food production, as well as opening up value chains across the countries. So if you look at the Eastern Caribbean, most of the food comes from Miami. So when there's a hurricane, when there's additional tariffs, otherwise it causes significant problems. The region also faces a double burden of malnutrition as well as rising obesity and NDCs along with undernutrition, which is really driven by the dependence on ultra-processed foods and the reduction of the use of more traditional foods and local foodstuffs. On agriculture across the Caribbean, we're very highly exposed to hurricanes, droughts, and floods. And this is clearly evidenced by Hurricane Beryl in 2024, which hit St. Vincent and the Grenadines as well as Grenada. And then also most recently, which is still very high in the news cycle, the devastating hurricane that hit Jamaica, Cuba, and Haiti. So while some of these countries are a little bit outside of my scope, it's really important to mention because of the really interdependency that all of these countries have on one another. So when one country such as Jamaica gets hit by a hurricane, it does have a significant knock-on effects, both on food value chains, but also on employment and other issues. The UN in the Eastern Caribbean, one more thing. Given that land is at such a high price and commodity across the Caribbean, we really need to find ways to make sure that we have a multifunctional landscape. So we're taking care of agriculture, but we're also preserving biodiversity and ensuring that we have food and ecosystem services taken account of and cared for. And finally, in the Eastern Caribbean, we've been working, as my friend said, to have national food pathways dialogues, and we're also developing action plans. We've done those so far in St. Lucia, Grenada, and Antigua, and now we're working on St. Kitts, and we'll continue on with Dominica and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Sorry, it gets confusing when you cover so many countries. So what we're doing is we're providing technical support and policy guidance, working with governments, NGOs, academia, and the private sector. And importantly, we have teams working in all of these countries. So we have about 25 staff on each of these small islands who are supporting government in this process. And we're also facilitating regional coordination and knowledge exchange. So working with our member states who are supporting some of these countries, as well as regional organizations such as CARICOM and the OECS and others. And then finally, nothing really gets done without having some access to development finance. So we're working with governments to mobilize climate and development finance. And then I think coming back to the beginning and to the COP presidency, we see any work on climate as strengthening sustainable development and delivering the SDGs, and they can't be pulled apart. They're mutually dependent upon each other. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I believe with what you explained also on the main challenges in this region in terms of import dependency, in terms of unfunctioning or underutilized agricultural sector, malnutrition, I think it is very key and encouraging that many countries in this region are starting to take on this issue of developing national pathways. It is very important also to make sure that this is updated and including the different factors from food system transformation to climate action to the biodiversity measures, to what also was referred to by Saulo this morning about being people-centric. So now we listen to two perspectives, one from a global perspective, regional perspective. Now I would like to invite Dr. Lisa Walpolm, who is the Director of Food Nation Denmark. You are working very closely with the private sector and civil society in transforming food system in Denmark. Can you give us some insights on how this work is going? Also one example of success stories. Over to you.
Thank you very much. And first of all, thank you very much for the organizers. Of course, being here on the Nordic Pavilion, it's a great pleasure to come from Denmark, and I will do my best to share not only a Danish perspective, but really what we share among the Nordic countries. A lot of values that we really share. But briefly about Food Nation, as you said, we are working both with private sector and also the public sector. We are established as a true public-private partnership. We're not for profit. We're not a political organization. So our task is to share the best practices, the knowledge, the good solutions, the products which are already on the markets that could be scaled in order to reach the targets of transforming the agri-food systems also on a global scale, definitely on a global scale. So I will do my best to bring in a few perspectives on how this has been done in Denmark and how we're working with this in Denmark. Not saying, of course, that this is applicable to all nations, but hopefully with the aim of inspiring other nations to take action in this direction. So our experience certainly show that by including respectfully and with trust in mind the different perspectives from both science, academia, science, the private sector, and of course the public sector, this creates the best possible platform in creating long-term solutions, setting targets, and then creating the long-term run for investments in the food sector. And to give you one example of this profound transformation, last year Denmark introduced a new legislation in Denmark which is going to transform our whole country, the whole agricultural country. So we're going to take out 15% of the agricultural land to transform it into nature. And we are going to do this with the aim of still producing. So we are not closing down the agriculture and food production, but we are going to produce more on less land, and we're doing it in a better way. We're going to do it. We are going to do it by introducing, of course, technologies along the value chain, and also by involvement of the growers. So the farmers is actually at the center of this decision making. And that is maybe one of the key messages that I would also like to bring in here, that we really need to bring in the people really on the ground in order to make this happen also on a long-term basis. But the experience from Denmark certainly is that you need really these huge frameworks to come into place, huge agreements, trying to solve really a lot of challenges at the same time. What we're looking at in Denmark is both concerning biodiversity, it's concerning our the sea around Denmark, and it's also concerning the productivity on the farmland. So looking into long-term solutions really need all stakeholders at the table. So this is one solution, and we are right now about to implement it. And just to say how serious this is being taken by the Danish government, a special minister has been appointed to roll this agreement out. So it's really a serious matter. And it's also serious matter for me to make you understand that everyone was really at the table making this decision. Both the natural, the environmental organizations, the NGOs, and the agricultural society. So all the stakeholders has been at the table, and of course, the decision, the agreement is science-based. So the targets that has been set in this agreement is of course science-based. What can nature bear? What are the limits of nature? And this is what the targets aim for. So that was one good example, and I have a few others.
Go for another one. I think this was nice. Another one.
Another one now? Okay. Because this is linked to the topics that you mentioned, both of you. This is linked to the national dietary guidelines. Again, I would like to highlight that back in 2021, Denmark was the first country in the world to launch new national guidelines, nutritional guidelines, with the focus of climate included in it. So the national dietary guideline was simply adjusted, including the different levels of intake of different products, with guidelines to go in a more plant-rich diet. So this is not to say that something should be excluded of your diet, but really with a more diversified diet, as you mentioned, and a more balanced diet. So a diversification of your intake of proteins has certainly been highlighted with these national dietary guidelines, and it is a clear understanding in both industry and also public sector that this is important. And one thing I would like to highlight here is the importance of the private sector, because what we really see is that when we set these really ambitious targets, both concerning transformation of land use, transformation of our diet, private sector use these targets as levers for innovation. And we really need this innovation to accelerate in order to provide us with the proper technological solutions and products when we are going to do things differently. So I think it could be really interesting to talk about how we really create these levers for innovation and bring them all the way out to the market. We have several solutions on the market already. We need to scale them. Thank you.
No, I think what is really interesting about the two examples that you gave is that you implement the food systems approach. So you engage everyone, you have inclusive process, you engage the private sector, it is based on science, it is supportive for food system transformation, but not only, you are also conserving nature and engaging the community. So these are two very important examples at the national level. Agree with you that some of these examples can be applicable to other countries, some cannot, but they are very good inspiration for everyone. So before we go to some questions, I would like to go back to the panelists for quick intervention. We are in COP30, but next year also we have the UNCCD COP, we have the COP of biodiversity as well. Where do you see the most important, if you have to recommend the one main intervention in food system that can support the 3 Rio Convention and go across the 3 COPs, what would it be? Over to you.
No, I think there is a convergence issue here, I mean, between the convention of the CBD in Cali, my home country, and this one, and is the linkage between nutrition and climate, but acknowledging that crop diversity could be that ingredient to make resilient the agricultural systems, the farmers' livelihoods, and also the consumers themselves. I mean, we receive the food, but as you say, where the food is coming from. If we don't diversify that basis of what is the food that is coming to us, if we don't diversify the agricultural systems, and if we don't diversify the livelihood of people that are living out of agriculture, I think it's going to be very hard to be resilient to climate change. So I think this is, to me, one of the main things that we need to keep stressing in the 2 conventions.
Okay. Thank you very much. I don't know, I'm looking at, I think, opportunities, not necessarily linked to CDB. One is looking at interregional trade. You know, we have very small islands where they really require that trade, particularly with some of the countries in the region that are net producers that aren't currently importing. Another one is to be able to facilitate that, having increased food safety standards and also shared safety standards across the Caribbean. So until all of the countries come on board with a similar regulations, it's very difficult to achieve that. And then finally, and I guess we probably hear this across nearly all of our countries, is data fragmentation and the ability to get the right data at the right time to make evidence-based policy decisions. You know, without addressing that, you know, it's very, very difficult for the governments to come up with an evidence-based, even though from a pragmatic standpoint, you see the problem in front of you, but we need the data to push the decision-making. Thank you.
Yes, try another one. Good. I very much agree on what both of you said, not least the last part here about data. We need data to set the necessary targets, but I would like to highlight that in order to be able to accelerate again the transformation, I think that we should really aim for involvement of private sector, because I certainly believe that we can document that we do have a lot of the solutions already ready to be scaled, and by involving private sector, inviting to dialogue respectfully, I do believe that this is one of the areas that should be prioritized. I mean, private sector's production is highly rely on biodiversity. So the close support and the interest in working with this area from private sector perspective is clear.
Very good. No, but very insightful point. Oh, okay. So one linkage between nature and nutrition. So dealing with food system as an objective also, but also as a mean of achieving better nutrition. Intra-regional trade, as Simon mentioned, data and monitoring systems. This is something that we see as a very important need on the ground, especially for developing countries, and the involvement of the private sector. Private sector engagement, responsible private sector that can support food system transformation and also bring positive results on the ground is something very, very key. We are doing well with time, so we have 10 minutes more. We can have 1 or 2 interventions or questions from the floor. Any? Okay, let's start. Do you have another mic?
Thank you very much for your presentations on how we can drive and transform food systems. My name is McLaren. I come from World Vision International in Southern Africa region. We've just launched an index to assess the NDs. It's called Hungry Futures Index. And what we are finding out is that the issues of hunger and child malnutrition in particular, they're not being considered in the current submission of NDCs. I like your response to say you've got products that are already tasted, that are ready to be rolled on the market. So what can we actually do, especially in the global south countries, in order to transform the food systems?
Thank you. I'm David Rogers from RAP. We work on the topic of food waste and supply chains. And that was my question, really. A lot of things that I go to here are focused on agriculture and not so much on what happens to food once it leaves the farm. And we know that food is wasted in the supply chain, in retail, and in the home. Why do you think people aren't talking about that as much? The impact for people's information, the impact of that food waste is about 10% of global emissions, 5 times that of aviation, and yet it's the topic that no one's really talking about. Why do you think that is?
Thank you very much. I'm not sure people are not talking about it. I think that it's really in people's awareness. But certainly we have to do more. I mean, I do believe the reason why we've been focusing on the primary sector is because it's a huge amount of the total part of the greenhouse gas emission which comes from the primary sector, and we have had a very urgent need to take action on that part as well. But you're completely right. The other parts of the value chain are very visual for all of us. And of course, we need to take action there as well. And this is all where you and me as ordinary consumers can feel we can make a difference. I think it's better, maybe, I don't know. But so from the Food Nation side, we are certainly also focusing on that part of the value chain. And we actually just launched a podcast in the United Nations Food Laws. I'll try again. We do have technological solutions to products in that part of the value chain. I mean, we can apply what we call biosolutions, technological for food, which can make them be fresh for a longer time. And still, it's with nature's own solutions. So I'm talking about enzymes, bacteria, very difficult, Mike. But I really think that we should scale those solutions, and I would love to talk more about this. And maybe if I can just get this lid off, because this is actually, you have the possibility of scan this QR, and it will take you to 5 pathways for inspiration, 5 pathways for within the planetary boundaries, by Denmark. And this includes what's being done, not least on the biosolution area, in order to reduce food loss and waste as well. I encourage all of you to gain more inspiration. 5 pathways. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's try with this one. Now, going back to your question, I think, yes, we need to acknowledge that the world has made unequal progress on food security and nutrition. So in overall, the world is producing more calories, but are uneven distributed. So we still have millions of people undernourished. But also when it is about nutritional quality, we also have a lot of malnutrition. So I think one of the reasons is because I think food security incentives are not looking enough on the quality. What is the food that we are providing when we provide national aid, for example, or international aid? So I think this is something where we need to start working more and linking with those that are designing those social protection mechanisms, also those that are designing the incentives to achieve equal progress on food security and nutrition. The other one is that I talk a lot about diversification, and when we talk about diversification is by using more native diversity, but also using technology also to achieve greater nutritional outcomes. So for instance, we have been working, for example, on breeding beans that have more iron, for example. So how we can align those technologies, native species, local knowledge towards the same goal, how we increase the nutritional outcomes of the food that we put in the plates of people. On the waste, yes, I think in this conversation was not present. I think at the level of awareness is raising the part of waste. In our side, we have been, for example, exploring how we can use waste from local food markets to produce biogas, and also as a byproduct to produce a bio. But to me, the technology is there. We have been testing it. We have been making analysis on how safe it is to use that bio inputs to grow more food. But I think we need two things. One, develop viable business models with the private sector, especially for the bio input part. For the biogas, there is more development on that part. And the second one is the standardization of the bio inputs. I think this is something where we need to invest more. Private sector, I think, knows more about standardization of products than what we know as scientists, but I think this is something where we can work together.
And I'll try to answer your question. You mentioned how this can relate to the NDCs. I think there is a commitment that NDCs aren't simply built by government, but they go through a national consultation process with NGOs, with civil society. And I think, looking to the database that you're developing is trying to find a way where those data systems don't simply become yours, but the methodology and the design is in such a way that they can be used by the national statistical system. So as an example, we've set up a WFP CARICOM real-time food security monitoring system for the Caribbean. And because it's linked to CARICOM, it becomes official data that then can be used. Because one of the problems is we talk about data scarcity. We have actually a lot of data, but none of it aligns to the methodology that enables the government to absorb it. So, thinking of ways, and I haven't obviously read all of the NDCs I haven't looked at the synthesis report yet, but I'm sure the agriculture sector is probably lagging a bit behind than energy production and others. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we came to the closure of our time, but I would like to thank Lisa, Simon, Marcella, and also Saulo for the intervention. 4 years after the Food System Summit, you explained very well how, despite all the challenges, increasing malnutrition, increasing hunger, biodiversity loss, but there are also very good examples happening at the regional, at the international and national level. CGIAR is a very good example of bringing science to the equation, the work in the Caribbean to address malnutrition, and also the national experience in Denmark, which I think is a very good inspiration for everyone. From the Food Systems Hub, will continue to work together. I think it is imperative to work together. I think the Belém Declaration will create also an important momentum to bring the food system at the center through a human-centered approach, and will be continuing to support Brazil in the way forward. I would like to thank you so much for this event. Thank you.